it's like the Jim Cherry idea of a love song, fucking kink anthem. But Fat Mike's like, oh, this is the song, and puts it on the comp. And all this is done without like my knowledge until it's done. That pissed me off.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Jim Cherry was one of the 5 original members of the band Strung Out, where he played bass guitar. He was also part of the initial lineup for the band Pulley, where he played guitar, and after releasing 3 albums with Strung Out, Cherry left the band in 1999. Shortly after, he formed the punk band Zero Down, acting as lead vocals and bassist. After releasing the one album with A Lifetime to Pay in 2001, he passed away on July 7th, 2002, which we'll talk about in this interview. In the liner notes of their album Exile and Oblivion, Strung Out dedicates the song Swan Dive to Cherry. Pulley dedicated the album Matters to Cherry, as well as the song Thanks, and he's also mentioned in the NOFX song Doornails from their 2006 album Wolves in Wolves Clothing. After interviewing Johanna Hackett in episode 64, where she talks about serial killer clothing, I told her that I was looking to get more females on the podcast because it just organically became kind of a boys club, and she threw a bunch of names at me and introduced me to a few people, some of whom I'm still trying to schedule some interviews with. Luckily, I was able to lock down some time with Wendy Cherry to do this interview. She was married to Jim up until the time that he passed away, so before doing this interview, I had no idea how much Jim contributed to both Strung Out and Pulley, because I automatically think the lead singer writes all the songs in every band for whatever reason, I guess because they're singing it. But that's not the case, because Jim wrote a ton of songs, and he wrote a lot of songs that I really loved from Strung Out. So you're going to hear a lot about that throughout the whole interview, and this is a really good interview because Wendy gives her perspective not only about the scene at that time, but also tells kind of this like punk rock love story, which is like really fucking endearing, and it's really sweet. And it's cool too because back then I looked at bands like Strung Out and Pulley and NOFX and Bad Religion and all these, and Pennywise, all these big bands as just like these giant bands that were not MTV status, but they were like the bands that I wanted to become as big as. So she's not only telling the story about Jim and her relationship with Jim and just like his everything that he contributed to the music scene back then. To me, she was at like the top of it with all these guys in California, like in that mix and going, yeah, it was as fucking awesome as you thought, or even more, which we definitely talk about. So I got her on the phone, or the Skype, and this is what we talk about. How she met Jim, going to her first Strung Out / Pulley show, Jim and Jordan's relationship, helping to pull his publishing, the Poison Chicken story, the Matters, the song Ultimate Devotion. She also talks about how Jim passed away due to complications, and a ton more. Before we begin, make sure you go check out his band Zero Down. You can just go right to Spotify or, I don't know, iTunes, wherever the fuck you listen to music, and check it out. That this is the last band that he was in and the last piece of work that he actually put out, and Wendy says that she believes it's his best. So go check that out. And I'll keep this other part short. Now, I've said many times that I do a bunch of things outside of the podcast. I do freelance work where I do animation and graphic design. That's drive80.com, drive80.com. But I also do a webcomic that I do called Daily Bread. If you're on Instagram, just go to Your Daily Bread and BRED. Today is Black Friday when this episode comes out. And it's also the same day that my brand new book is coming out, which is a sketchbook. And it's my 4th book that I've put out in 2 years. And it's called Draw Some Richards, a sketchbook for people who like to draw ... You get the idea. I struggled for a moment if I should promote this because it's like attached to this story that's like this great story. It has nothing to do with this. And I'm also promoting a sketchbook that's about people just drawing dicks. But I thought, hey, this is my podcast and I could do whatever the fuck I want. So I decided that I am going to promote it. Go to yourdailybread.com. You can buy the book there. You can also click on the link in the show notes. I'll have an ad on my thiswasthescene.com page as well. The book will be 20% off between today and the end of Cyber Monday. So you just go there, buy it. It's automatically deducted. The 20% discount's already added to it, which the book itself is $15, but I think with the discount it's like $12. So it's a great book to just kind of have lying around the house, or just draw with your loved ones, or give to your grandparents, or I don't fucking know. it's just a way to put your phone down and just laugh. And I've been testing this around Raleigh, and people are really getting a kick out of it. And I'm gonna be promoting the fuck out of this thing because I think it's hilarious. So yeah, go yourdailybread.com, BRED. You can buy it there, and that's all I'm gonna say. Besides, thank you to all the people who've donated. And if you want to do that, you go to thiswasthescene.com. You can donate there. Great. Someone actually asked if you can Venmo. You can Venmo Mike at drive80.com if you want to, and send whatever you want. But again, that's up to you. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started. Thanks for doing the call today, or the interview, or recording, whatever you want to call this.
It's actually nice to go down memory lane.
Typically, I'll interview people who were in a band, or they were a part of the band, or they were they own a record studio, or they did a zine. And this is interesting because Johanna, she introduced us because I'd asked her, I was like, do you know any women who are part of the scene? Because I was like, I've been kind of making this a boys club. And she said, oh yeah, definitely. And she connected us. So typically I have like all my questions that are set up to ask people about what got them to music, and then how they joined the band or started the band, and how they started touring, how they recorded. You're basically going to be telling Jim's, like, you're going to be talking about Strung Out and Jim, and but your perspective in music, and then punk rock, and then how you guys met, and then to kind of basically tell that story.
Yeah, that's an interesting one, and it's so typically Jimmy. I mean, it was. I look back on it now, and it's pretty hilarious. I was a computer nerd. I was an internet geek when I met him, and had just finished up getting rid of one company and was looking at starting another one. And when I got online, the internet was still text-based, believe it or not. The graphical user interface hadn't been invented yet, because I got on in like 93. So I met Jimmy in the spring of 96, and which is a hilarious story. If you want to hear it, I'll tell it to you.
The more details or stories you can tell, like, that's the best.
So I had a good friend, and we were hanging out at this coffee shop in Simi Valley called the Vampire Lounge, which was really cool. It'd have bands and like spoken word stuff, and it was just like a really cool hangout. So I was hanging out there, and the front was all plate glass windows. So I was looking out the front, and I saw this huge guy walking across the parking lot, and there was just something about him. I was just like, huh. So he comes in and walks straight to our table, and he knew my friend. And so my friend says, this is Jim Cherry. And I still remember the first time I saw his face. He looked at me, and he was just like really just coolly assessing me, like, who's this redhead? And I just like didn't get a good vibe from him. I just like coolly looked right back at him, was assessing him right back. And then he left, and that was it. And a few weeks later, I was hanging out at my friend's house, the same friend in Thousand Oaks, and he came over. And I will never forget this. I was sitting outside smoking, because I smoked back then, with my friend. And he's telling his friend that he just got his dick pierced. And his friend's like, well, let's see it. So he whips out his dick literally 4 inches under my nose. And I know it was just to see what I would do.
Wait, 4 inches? Wait, were you just sitting down and he just walked up to your face and did this?
Yeah, I was sitting down, and
Jesus.
I know. And I was so determined. Not to like freak out, because I knew I could tell he was a shit from the first second I met him. And so I just like looked at it, and it was really interesting piercing. He had the barbell both ways.
Ow.
Vertically and horizontally. So,
Jesus.
And I thought, wow, it's a nice dick, and actually now it's pretty. But I tried to like be cool, but I giggled because I was just like, what the hell? So I giggled and it hurt his feelings. And so I looked at him and I said, oh, your dick is fine. I'm just taken aback. It was like the stupidest thing. It was so funny. And then he laughed. And I went from like not really liking him to just really being interested in him. I'm like, who does that? Just whips it out 4 inches under someone's nose. I was just like immediately, because I'm a shit too. So I recognized it and we became, after that day, we became really, really good friends. And I was always really flirtatious with him, but he wasn't having it.
Oh, okay. So you weren't dating right away. You just became really good friends.
Yeah. But he wasn't having it. And I like, I wasn't used to at all. Usually when I went after somebody, it was fairly easy, for whatever reason. And I was just like, what in the hell? Well, I found out later that, my friend had told him, dude, she's going to fuck you and dump you. And, which was probably true, but that's a whole nother story. Anyway, so we got to be really good friends, and I still have. He was in Europe on my birthday, which is September 3rd, and I still have the card. He sent me flowers from Europe for my birthday, and it says, happy birthday, your best friend, Jim, and I still have it.
That's wild. So can I ask, how old were you guys at this point?
Oh, Jesus. So let's see. In 96, I was, wow. Wow. Seriously.
I know it's typically not like the best thing to ask people their age, but I just want like context there.
No, I don't mind. I was older than Jimmy, so I'm 51 now. He would have been 48 this year.
Okay.
So, God, in 96, I was what, 25, 26? I was a baby.
So kind of like, so I want to kind of lead up to this part. And so prior to this, so you're from Simi Valley, right?
No, actually, I'm from Agora Hills, which is right next to Thousand Oaks.
Oh, okay. That's not too far though.
Yeah, no, not at all.
I actually lived in the valley years ago, like 20 years ago. I was in Canoga Park.
Oh, yeah, that's right up the street from
Yeah,
Agora.
super close. Like, were you part of like the punk? Because this whole podcast is about like the late 90s scene. So I want to see like, were you into punk music at the time or like in music at all? Or did like knowing Jim or Jimmy, did you like calling him Jim or Jimmy?
Um,
Or Jim?
I called him Jim, but everybody else called him Jimmy. His mom, his dad. But I always called him Jim or Babe.
That's cute. I'll probably go back and forth. But like, so leading up to meeting Jim, were you part of like the scene?
It's interesting. Punk really was my scene, but not the kind of melodic punk. I was like more into the old school stuff, like the Cramps and Jello Biafra and that whole older genre. And
Right.
I was not familiar at all with the kind of new melodic punk at all.
Like the Fat Wreck sound that was coming out around then.
Yeah, no, the Fat Wreck, the Epitaph, all of that. I was like, well, and granted, I was, I loved Black Flag. All the older stuff was, what I was into. But I was really kind of really fluid, and I didn't dress a certain way, and I liked all different types of music. But I did love that genre of punk rock.
How'd you get into it? Like, I want to like just go back like a little bit. Like, what got you into that scene particularly?
That started in high school, really. I moved out here from a little town right outside of Memphis, Tennessee when I was 13 and a half. the kind of group that I fell into in high school, that was their thing. And I just, I was redheaded and angry and rebellious, and I was like, fuck society. And so the music just really, really resonated with me. I mean, gosh, by the time I was 15, I was like, shaved the side of my head. It's like,
Oh, wow.
Here we go. Yeah. Yeah. Because I've always been like, I'm just another one of those that never fit in anywhere. And that's been my whole life. So the punk scene really resonated.
Did you know Johanna before, like, when you were younger, or did you meet her when she was doing Serial Killer?
I met her. Jim adored her. Jim adored her. And I met Johanna through Jim. I mean, there's so many pictures of Jim with that Tupac, the kaput shirt.
Yeah.
I mean, that was his favorite shirt. As a matter of fact, when I washed it, he'd make me hang it up. It's like, don't dry that, it'll ruin it. So.
Okay, so you guys meet, and so like you're in the scene, you happen to be this bar, you guys meet because he's friends with your friend. Like,
Mm-hmm.
and then, so tell me about that. Like, when you guys meet and start becoming friends, like, so I'm guessing at this point Strung Out was already a band when you met him.
Strung Out and Pulley.
Okay, so I know that Pulley was what? That's the singer from Pulley. What's his name? He was in the Dodgers.
Scott Radinsky.
Scott. Yeah. So they had that. So Jim was doing double duty in Pulley and Strung Out at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
And actually, at the time, in the very beginning, so was Jordan.
Oh, really?
Yeah, Jordan was the drummer for Pulley in the very, very beginning.
Oh, I did not know
So
that.
this is,
I know it was like a collaboration of like different artists that did Pulley. It was like a bunch of different bands, and they kind of did that, almost like Me First and the Gimme Gimmes, but like not jokingly.
yeah, exactly. So, yeah, so this is so typically Jimmy. So finally, I managed to seduce him on Halloween that year. My God, it's the hardest work I've ever done. It took months.
Okay, so this was months or years?
Months. It
Okay.
took months. Because he sent me flowers on my birthday in September. He got back from Europe mid-September, and by Halloween, I finally, cornered him. So we were, like, thick as thieves from then on. And he's like, and we were always together. I mean, we just, pretty much our whole marriage, we preferred each other's company over anyone else's. And, that's just how we were. So he says, I'm in this little band, he tells me, because I'm doing my work on my computer. And he's like, he goes, do you want to come to practice? And I'm like, sure. And I'm like, what do you play? He goes, oh, well, I can play most instruments, but I play bass in this band. I'm like, what do you mean in this band? He goes, well, I play guitar in another band. I'm like, okay, that's interesting. And I'm like, what kind of music? And he's like, punk. And I'm like, oh, awesome. So I go to, there was a little studio behind Jordan's house, and that's where Strung Out practiced. And I say, I'll go with you. How long is it? He said, a couple hours. I said, okay, I have some work to finish up. He goes, just bring your computer. So I bring my computer. There's a couch in the studio. The guys are all in there. I go and sit down. I plug in my computer, and I was like feeling a little shy, and also like, I don't know what the hell to expect, what's going on, because my version of punk is way different than their version.
Right.
Jim walks in, does not say a word, doesn't introduce me. I mean, it's just so typical Jim. So I wish you would have known him. He was such a unique individual. And I just sit down, I don't say a word, and plug in my computer, and they start. And I was like, what in the sweet hell is this? This is a punk. This isn't punk.
What did you think it sounded like?
Something completely, I mean, it was punk, but it wasn't like anything I'd ever heard. It was really melodic and fat. I mean, obviously fast, but just, more technical.
Yeah, I'd say more full than like.
More full, more technical. And
Yeah.
I was like, and I played drums in school.
Okay.
Yeah, I got my first set when I was in 6th grade. So I was just fascinated with Jordan. I was like, holy shit, this guy can hit the skins. So.
And this was for Strung Out practice or Pulley practice, you said?
Strung Out.
Okay.
And they were just like looking at me like, okay, she's on a computer. What's she doing? Who is she? I'd look up once in a while. And, basically, that was his little band. That's how I was introduced. And the very first show I went to was a Strung Out Pulley show in San Luis Obispo. At some like VFW lodge, and it was packed and the kids were screaming the lyrics, and I was just like, oh, you know what, this is a thing. Like, Jim is in a thing, and I had no idea for a few months.
And this
no
was
clue.
And this was 96, you said?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so then that's when Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues was out. I'm obviously cheating. I'm looking at Wikipedia, but for reference. But they had their second album was out at this point, or they were writing and recording it at this point.
No, it was out.
Okay.
It was out, and the place was packed. There was mosh pit, crowd surfing, kids are screaming the lyrics, and I was just like, oh my God. And then I watched him Strung Out set. I don't know if you've ever seen him live.
My old band actually played a show with them one time.
What's your old band?
It was called Lanemeyer.
Oh, wow. How fun.
They were on tour. They were in a Winnebago. And we played with them at this place called Planet Trog out in Pennsylvania, like the middle of nowhere. Nah, I mean, Pennsylvania's kind of like middle of nowhere. Apologies, anyone listening from Pennsylvania. But yeah, they showed up in that, and I mean, the show was small, but I remember they were playing, like, the singer had like these skeleton gloves on or something like that. But
oh yeah, Jason loved those gloves. That's so funny.
But yeah, sorry, but go on.
So the sets are intense. I mean, the boys just don't stand around.
Yeah.
So I watched him play a full set with Pulley, and Jordan play a full set with Pulley, and then switch to bass and play a full set with Strung Out and Jordan. And I was like, okay, these boys are not fucking around. They have stamina. I mean, it was intense, and the crowd was intense, and that was my first introduction to what my other side of my husband.
What was the practice like? Were they joking around? I mean, you said it for a couple hours. Were they like polishing the songs? Were they jumping around? Were they like, were they super focused on it, or were they just having a good time and like, oh, we'll just play music for 2 hours?
No, you know what? There was such a difference between Strung Out and Pulley. They saved the jumping for stage. I mean, they were into it, and plus that little studio behind Jordan's house was small. But they, not that much joking around. And look, there was bad blood between Jim and Jordan from minute one, I guess. And, for a little while there, I got along with Jordan better than Jim because, Jordan's clever and he was interested in the internet. And I think he was an early adopter. He saw the potential as far as marketing, and do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I was teaching in no time. I was teaching Jordan the ins and outs, and not that long either. Jordan's like, okay, once he figured out what was what, he's like, I got this. Jim, basically, Jordan didn't like Jim and Jim didn't like Jordan. So there wasn't a lot of joking around, and they were pretty much business. I mean, they all, except for Jim and Jordan, they all seemed to get along that first practice and subsequent ones. But man, the rift between Jim and Jordan was pretty wide.
I'm so confused by this because they were in two bands together, like two big like bands that were pretty big. Like I think I would say maybe some people could argue that Strung Out was a little bit bigger than Pulley, just because I think from that. I mean, I remember that I heard of both bands, but Strung Out I heard of more. But I mean, either way, they were two big bands at the time. So why were they so at odds, and why would they be in both bands?
Just from what I could see and what I was told, basically, Jim and Jordan, their personalities, probably never meshed. Jim never trusted Jordan. He just said he never liked him, never trusted him. When Scott got Pulley together, he tapped Jordan, and so yeah, they were into. And Strung Out was around longer, and at that point, I think they obviously had more of a following, so they were at the time bigger than Pulley. But yeah, they were in two bands together, and I mean, they were professionals.
Yeah.
They played together, they practiced together, wrote music together, but there wasn't no bromance going on there.
It sounds like it.
So, and I mean, it's kind of public knowledge. Jim punched Jordan a couple times.
I mean, like I said, I was in a band. There is something about being in a band, and I think that, again, this is just guessing, but what I notice is that when people have the same focus, especially if they're very driven and they want that to be their future, and if they're at odds with someone else getting in the way of that happening, it can create tension. So I think, and then sometimes when bands break up, those two people can just become like fine with each other. But I think when there's like a financial tie or a creative tie to something, like going in a direction that can just cause in any, like I said, in any band, it can cause two people just fucking not stand each other at all.
Yeah, well, that's pretty much what it was. It was gnarly, but until later on, Jordan was lovely to me. I mean, eventually I did something that I don't think he was happy with, but even when they were recording Twisted by Design, I'd come to the studio and cook for those guys, and Jordan loved my cooking. I used to make chicken fettuccine Florentine, and Jordan loved that. But much later, actually a year or so before Jimmy was kicked out of Strung Out, he wanted to pull his publishing. He was like, I need to figure out how to do this. And I was like, well, I'm sure I can figure it out, because that's just how my mind works. It's like, there's nothing I can't do as far as I'm concerned. So I educated myself and figured out how to pull his publishing, because at the time, Strung Out, they split everything. Things had progressed. His kind of dislike, I think, for the direction the band wanted to go in, and then Jordan, I think, just culminated in him wanting to have more control over the music that he wrote. I look back on that, and I'm kind of at peace with it, because whatever Jimmy wanted, as far as I was concerned, he got. I mean, I wasn't going to say no to him, and that's just, our marriage was like, we have each other's back. And so when he wanted to pull his publishing, I was like, I'll make it happen.
So when you pull your publishing, though, what does that mean?
That instead of splitting it 5 ways, that he writes 100% of a song, then he gets 100% of the
royalty.
Songwriter. Yeah.
Oh, okay. How many of the songs did he write?
Oh my God, there's just like a list.
Really? I did not know that.
Well, I mean, I have the catalog up here.
So like on like Suburban Teenage Wasteland Blues, like how many of those songs did he write?
I would have to look.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I don't know off the top of my head, but I have actually a music catalog, because, obviously as his heir, I pretty much manage all of his publishing now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I say that. I mean, I have somebody else manages it.
Yeah, but you have the rights to it.
Yeah, I have the rights. I have all of his guitars and his basses. I'm sitting here looking at one of the last songs he ever wrote, actually, called Restlessness. He left binders of lyrics that they never turned into songs, and I have them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I'm sitting here looking at it, and it says, there's a sickness pumping through my body that tells me not to dream. To be forgotten long before you're gone can be a painful thing.
So was he writing that, was this towards the end?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, this was actually, you know what, Restlessness, I can tell by the way he was writing. There was a period of time between the time he got kicked out of Strung Out and right before he started Zero Down.
Yeah.
That, he was really, I think there was a part of him that was relieved when they kicked him out, but, in any bad relationship, there's a part of you that's glad it's over, but another part that is heartbroken.
Yeah. Well, it's your baby.
Yeah. And speaking of babies, I mean, Strung Out started in 91. They were all babies.
So how old were they when they started? So they were in their teens?
Yeah, in their teens. I mean, just, it's crazy. But you know what? Good for them because they're all kick-ass musicians. I just saw Rob not too long ago at a memorial. You know, there's something about punk rock. I saw Rob and I saw Ryan Green too. Do you know who that is?
Ryan Green sounds familiar.
The producer?
Yes.
Yeah. So I saw him and Rob at this memorial, and I mean, it had been years and years. And I swear, something about punk rock, no one ages. Rob looks exactly the same, is still just the biggest sweetheart. Rob was always a sweetheart. And same with Ryan, because I was up in San Francisco when, and I can't remember what record it was. You know what? No, it wasn't Twisted. Twisted was done in Los Angeles or in the Valley. I can't remember what, maybe it was a Pulley record? Yeah, it was a Pulley record, I think, in San Francisco. But anyway, I was up there in Ryan's studio with him. So, and I toured with both bands. As a matter of fact, I was Zero Down's merch girl.
Okay, so I want to talk about that. Actually, real quick, I definitely remember Ryan Green. His name was huge back then. He even did you know the guys in Bigwig at all?
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember, so he did their third album, Invitation to Tragedy. I remember, but we heard of him because of Punk and Drublick from NOFX, and then that guy's name was like infamous. Not, I mean, it's kind of a big fucking word, but he was very well known back then. So it's just wild that you would mention that. I hadn't heard that name in so long.
Yeah, and he's still awesome. I mean,
Crazy.
just, yeah, I mean, you know, there's a few people that I just adored. I always liked Jason Cruz. I always liked Rob, their whole, you know, personality. Jake and I never really got close, but Jake, God love him, he's just like the stoner Jake, so cute. I love, now Scott Radinsky, he's like the consummate professional. I never got close to Scott because he like had boundaries. Do you know what I mean?
What do you mean?
Uh, um, it's like, I always got the impression that it's like, okay, the band is like the boys and the girlfriends are just like the girlfriends or the wives or whatever. There's like a separation there. So I never really got close to Scott, but he was always lovely to me. And my God, I always loved that man's voice.
Yeah.
Scott Radinsky's voice. I was just him, and Jim was good friends with Matt Riddle, who was in Pulley when it started.
Okay. Yeah, I love Matt Riddle.
Oh my God, Matt is just he's a phenomenal bass player. He has a phenomenal voice, and he's a big sweetheart.
Yeah, he actually was one of my biggest influences playing bass. I started playing with my fingers because me and my buddies learned on face-to-face records, and I was like, how does this guy still play with his fingers? It's so fucking difficult. But yeah, I always look up to that guy.
I would watch him play in Pulley and just be like, holy shit, this is a musician. Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
It was just amazing.
When I started this podcast, it was having different viewpoints of that scene, and it was really focused on New Jersey and what we were doing, and then it expanded outside of the people that influenced us. So I remember being in a small band in Jersey saying like, I want to tour, I want to be doing these cool videos and these videography or video compilations. Fat Records and Epitaph were like the crowning jewel of like these are the labels you'd want to get on. And then so then like you being in the middle of these bands who were like the bands that people were looking up to, like what did that look like? Do you kind of see like, wow, we're all in the kind of the like in the center of all these bands blowing up, and like I can see this happening? Or was it just, yeah, oh yeah, these guys are going on tour and oh that's cool, they had a good time, or I bet they come back, we go to bars and it's just normal for us?
Well, it's a mix of the two. I mean, basically, most of the like holy shit moments came in retrospect. Like the first time I met AFI,
Yeah.
and they were in, you know, Jim liked those guys, but they were broke and they were in this like shitty van. I mean, do you know what I mean?
Oh,
It was
yeah.
just like the first time you meet someone and to see them and they're not anything. And then all of a sudden they're just like huge. And it was the same but because I wasn't like familiar with the scene before I got into it, it's like I had no idea who Fletcher was. I just thought, oh shit, he's a friend of Jim's that's like as big as Jim. That's a trip. And Fletcher was always just a total sweetheart. So, and then you see him on stage. It was just a trip because I, being kind of a newbie, was like not prepared for any of it.
What do you mean, like, where is it? You just would show up at these shows and they'd be playing these sold out clubs, and you were like, my friends are doing this?
Yeah, and kids are screaming the lyrics, and I'm standing on the side of the stage because, here I am. My purse was always full of fucking hair ties and clips for guitar strings.
Okay.
That's like what was in my purse.
For Jim's hair?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So I had like the first couple of years with Jimmy were like there was a lot of holy shit moments.
Did you like the bands? Like when you listened to him, did you kind of find yourself liking the music not because you were married to him, but because you were like, these songs are fucking good?
Actually, yeah, which was weird. Now, I loved Pulley. And it's hard. I don't know if it's because I loved Mike Harder, who's still in Pulley, and Tyler was a friend of Jim's, and Chris Aiken was a good friend of Tyler's. So Chris Aiken's the bass player now for Strung Out, and Tyler's the bass player for Pulley. Mike and I really hit it off first thing, so I've always adored Mike. And I don't know what it is about Pulley, but when I put it on, when I'm like reminiscent, I put Pulley on first. I don't know if Strung Out's just a little harder or what, but I mean, obviously I love both, but I think I favor Pulley musically a little more.
Why?
If that makes sense.
Yeah, why though? Just because Scott's voice? You said you like that, you just like that a lot, or is there something about like the lyrics that connect you to it, or I don't know, the speed?
It's not the lyrics because, God bless him. I've never been able to understand a fucking idea that Scott's trying to get across. But Jim's lyrics, I could pretty much. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, but I think it's like, I don't know. I love the guitar in Pulley, especially a steam driven engine. I don't know. It's just, it's just a whole different thing, the feel of Pulley than Strung Out. Strung Out is like interesting because listening to it after being with Jim, I can tell who mostly influenced this song, if it was Rob, Jake, Jason, or Jim. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they kind of have their writing signature. So, and you start to pick that up when I was around when Twisted was being recorded. I can always tell what's what. My God, I love Bring Out Your Dead.
Yes, that was the song that made me love the band. And I saw they were on some compilation. It was a video comp. I think it was a Hopeless video comp. And it was them playing live, and Jim's in it. Like Jim's like just like going nuts on stage. And I like seeing that song. I was like, what is this fucking song? Because I like darker stuff back then, like way more melodic. And that song was like, it just stood out for some reason. It was just darker.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that song.
And Strung Out, I think, has a darker edge to them than Pulley.
Pulley's a bit brighter.
Yeah, brighter. That's a good. Yeah.
So tell me about like touring, because
oh Jesus.
I'd love to hear any crazy stories or just story. Like how was it like going on tour? Were they like, okay, cool, you can bring wives or girlfriends on tour, or was there kind of like, oh great, you're bringing your wife or a girlfriend on tour?
I'm thinking of like when Strung Out, and I think I'm trying to think, because Jimmy and I met in '96 and we were married on December 27th, 1997. So it was fast, which, no regrets there because it was always right.
Yeah.
I want to say Strung Out opened for Offspring in 96 or 97. Maybe, no, I think it was 97. I didn't go on the complete tour, but Jason's girlfriend and Jake's girlfriend at the time and were going. They were pretty cool with it. I did go on a short pulley tour in the Matters, and I was the only one, but I've always had like a tomboy streak, and I can hold my own with any dude.
Yeah. I can
so, I'm Southern. Southern girls, they're just not foofy.
Yeah, I've noticed that living in North Carolina.
Yeah, Southern girls aren't foofy. But I did have a moment on that pulley tour. Guys are pretty different from girls when they're on the road. And so Jim and I are sitting in the back of the Matters, and I'm like, babe, and I'm all quiet, I have to pee. And he looks at me and he rolls his eyes because Scott Radinsky hates to stop. Like when they're on the road and they're going, he hates to stop. So finally I was like, okay, I really have to pee. And so he tells Scott, and Scott chucks an empty Gatorade bottle in the back at me.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, Jesus is right. I was like, and Jim saw it happening because I have a shit temper. I'm Irish and I'm Southern. And he saw me about to explode, and then Scott laughed and pulled over. I was just like, somebody's about to fucking die. I mean, I was pissed.
And that's the day Pulley died.
No, I know, but Scott, I imagine, still gives zero fucks, but Scott Radinsky gives zero fucks about anything. He just could not care less, which is one of the things I like most about him.
So were you pulling, like, were you doing duties on tour? Were you doing like merch or roadieing, or were you kind of like, what was it when you guys pulled up to a gig? What were you doing?
They had Strung Out had merch people. Actually, so did Pulley. I was pretty much Jim's bitch.
Okay.
His freaking hair ties, his guitar strings, his, plier clips or whatever for his guitar.
You were the gym tech?
Yeah, I was Jim's roadie.
Okay.
It's like, yay, seriously. You're like, no, I was. Looking back now, and I'm sure anyone else you talk to that we were close, if you talk to anyone else in Strung Out or Pulley, I fucking spoiled him rotten. I really did.
Well, I mean, it sounds like it, especially like holding his hair ties. Did they fall out like frequently when he was just like rocking on stage?
They would break, they'd fall out, Jesus Christ. I saw him jump. I wished I could remember where it was. I saw him jump once and land and go right through a fucking stage.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Scared me to death. I thought, oh God, he's hurt. No, the stage was hurt. There was a huge hole in it, but he was fine.
Like how deep did he go into the stage? Like up to his waist, or just like?
No, all you could see was his nose up.
Holy shit.
I know.
Where was this?
I can't even remember. It was somewhere back east, I want to say.
All right.
So.
I think I would have heard that story. I feel like that would have kind of ricocheted through the scene. Like, dude, the bassist from Strung Out went through the stage last night.
Oh, yeah. Well, it was a small venue, but, it scared the shit out of me. And then, oh, God, you're going to love this story. So Pulley's playing a show, and it's local somewhere. I want to say it's San Luis Obispo or somewhere a little bit up north, maybe Santa Barbara. And so I say, you know what, I'll cook. And so basically everyone ends up at Jim's mom's house in Simi. And so I make this dish that Jim loved that I love. Jim hadn't had it, called 40 clove chicken. You ever had it?
No.
It's chicken with 40 cloves of garlic. Well, unbeknownst to me, you have to be used to that much garlic.
Or you're going to shit your brains out, basically.
So basically, everyone eats.
Oh, were they playing that night?
Yeah, they were playing
okay.
that.
Okay.
So everyone eats, and then we go to the show, and I was like, this is kind of like maybe the second time I met the guys in Pulley. It's like, oh, let me cook for you, because, that's what Southern girls do. It's like, oh, let me fix you something to eat. So basically, Pulley's playing, and Jim jumps, and when he lands, he completely shits his pants.
Oh my God.
And so,
He's not very good at jumping and having good outcomes when he lands.
oh my God. So I was mortified. And so for a long time after that, there's this song, and I can't remember what Pulley song, but at the very end, Scott would scream "poison chicken," and that's why. And that's why.
Did he shit himself where, I don't think I get too detailed, but like, did everyone notice, or you just kind of caught his face where he would looked at you like, oh God?
Oh no, it was like down his legs.
Oh my God.
Yeah, oh my God is right. So I was mortified. I started crying. I started crying. I was just like, oh my God, it was my cooking. But it wasn't. It was the garlic. So,
This is the funniest story I've heard out of every interview I've done.
and and you know what? I swear to God, Scott Radinsky was just so tickled that I was crying. That I was just so. I mean, he was just like, "Now that's fucking punk rock," you know. And so, and then
Oh
and
man.
I wish I could remember what song when he'd scream "poison chicken." I was just like, fuck you, Scott. Not funny.
I've like tried to figure out questions. I've like lost my place because I was just so fucked up.
Oh, Jim shitting his pants on stage.
Oh God.
Yeah, Matt Riddle remember that shit because they were fucking hysterical. They were hysterical.
What were those guys like on tour? Did everyone get along? I mean, obviously not Jim and Jordan, but when they'd show up at like were the majority of the shows, and kind of, there's two different questions here, but like were the majority of the shows pretty big, so that let off some stress from them as a band, or it was just up and down where it would cause a little tension?
You know what? Pulley was always fun to me, and they all, with the exception, and Jordan wasn't in Pulley that long. Tony showed up pretty quick. Jordan wasn't in Pulley that long at all, and if I remember correctly, it may have been because Pulley was always fun. All those guys got along. Although, I tell you, punk rock bands are so fucking weird. So when Jordan was in Pulley, this is like the first year, they come home from tour, and it was a United States tour. And anyway, the Matters was at Jordan's in the Valley. Jordan used to live in Canoga Park. I mean, he may still live there. I don't know. But at the time, he lived in Canoga Park. So I went to pick Jimmy up from tour. The Matters is parked in the cul-de-sac, and I pull up. Fucking Scott Radinsky gets out of the Matters mobile, and he's got Kleenex twisted like a straw and Kleenex up both nostrils. Gets off the fucking bus. And I'm like, what in the sweet hell? And then Jim gets off, and he's like limping. And I'm like, what in the fuck? And then Jim says bye to all the guys. Him and Scott are fine. And Jim gets in the car, and I'm like, what in the fuck? And he's like, oh, Scott and I went hallway. And I'm like, what in the fuck is hallway? I guess if they passed each other in like the hallway of the Matters, they'd just start wailing on each other.
Just for fun?
I guess. I don't know. So Scott's obviously got a bloody nose. Jim's like limping. I'm like, you guys are so fucking stupid. I don't even get it.
Wait, what's the Matters? Is that the name of the bus?
The Matters?
Yeah.
The Matters is the obsessed freaking, I don't know, maybe blood of virgins have been spilled in it. The Matters mobile, the Pulley tour bus, I think it finally died. But yeah, one of their albums is called Matters. Actually, they dedicated that album to Jim.
Okay, I've never heard of this.
The Matters mobile?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. And I don't even know where it got its name. I don't know anything. I mean, it was just always the Matters.
But this was a Winnebago?
No, it was like...
Because you said hallway, so obviously they were able to move past each other.
Yeah. It was just like, I don't know what it was. I'll have to find a picture of it. Or you'll have to, there's pictures of it all over Pulley stuff. I mean, it's just
Oh, okay. Yeah, it looks like the same. Yeah, like Lagwagon had the same kind of bus they toured in back then.
And it was just a piece of crap, and Scott Rudinski loved that damn thing.
Yeah.
So,
Okay. Yeah, I see the picture on the cover. Oh wow, I didn't know that.
like one of the funnest times I think I had was I flew to Florida to meet up with Strung Out when they were opening up for the Offspring, and that tour was insane. I mean, that was just fun. And my other favorite time was I think it was the Warped Tour in New York in maybe 97 and or 98, and that was just a party because it was Strung Out. I think it was Pulley, Pennywise. I mean, that
Damn.
if you look at the old Warped lineups, it was just everybody. And I remember being downstairs at the hotel and everyone was waiting on Fletcher. I can't remember who it was in Pennywise, but Jim was laughing. I'm like, what? And he said, fucking Fletcher. And I said, what? And he said, they're cruising around New York and so-and-so, I can't believe who it was, so-and-so told him not to eat one of those fucking hot dogs off the street cart. And Fletcher's like, I'm hungry. So Fletcher ate one of those fucking hot dogs and it just fucked him up. He was sick.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So, but still had to play.
So did he also shit himself on stage, or?
I'm sure.
Like, yeah, because I mean, like again, those are the bands that were on the top. Obviously, Offspring and all that, and Green Day, they were MTV status huge, but
Yeah.
right below them, I mean, I think a lot of people respected all those bands like Strung Out, Pennywise, and all that because they were so big, but they didn't cross over into. I mean, they might have had like videos on 120 minutes or just late night MTV. It's just crazy to just be at that to the top of all that and just witnessing it behind the scenes. Like that to me, I just like I remember being 17. Like, what is the life of these guys? This must be insane to show up there and just pack thousands of people or kids in these stadiums or these clubs, and everyone's going ape shit for your music, and it's just like you're the top of your fucking game. That must have just felt amazing.
You know what? I'll be honest with you. Whatever your 17-year-old self imagined it was like, times it by about 5, and that's what it was like.
Jesus Christ.
That's so
cool.
Just, I mean, it was like fucking booze and pot and laughing and wrestling and fighting and fucking suitcases of money and chicks and topless chicks and strippers. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it was the spontaneous songwriting is what always fascinated me.
Yeah, talk about that. Like, how would songs come about, and what was the process with those guys?
I think Pulley was a little bit more like Strung Out. They pretty much worked on their own shit and then brought it together and kind of riffed off each other, basically. Jim wrote that Pulley song "She" on a napkin because that was the only thing he had in his car in 8 minutes.
I mean, that's how it goes. I'd say a lot of really great songs are just it's an idea and boom, it's done, and then it becomes like the song. They're like, this must have taken forever. Like, no, it just popped in my head and I did it.
Yeah, but I saw him do that repeatedly. Jim's songs were the way he wrote was amazing to witness. It was absolutely amazing to witness. I never witnessed any of the other guys' process in Strung Out. Now, Pulley, I've seen them come up with something altogether, which is fascinating because when you have, different input, that's, I think what makes it really creative. But I witnessed Jim would lay in bed most nights with his acoustic, and boom, next thing you know, I hear that song that he wrote in bed next to me on an album.
Wow.
And that was fascinating. I mean, I believe that Jim died with his best songs still in him.
Well, it sounds like he just had like a well of just constant, like a need to create.
He did have a constant need to create. Jim had some challenges, and I think that's how he dealt with it and how he got it out. I mean, obviously, I'm a doctor now. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist, so I've done a lot of retrospective analysis on pretty much everyone and the creative process. I've never ever witnessed a process like him. Put it this way. So I was a child of the 80s, obviously. So I loved punk. I loved metal. Oh my God. I loved new wave. I just dug music. When Jim wasn't home, I'd play whatever I was in the mood for. And he didn't mind the metal because he liked Metallica and Iron Maiden too, just like the rest of us. But the new wave shit, he would, although I turned him on to The Cure.
Okay.
And yeah, he dug like Head on the Door. Do you know that 80s song, Whisper to a Scream?
Possibly.
There's this Pulley song, and you can, if you have Whisper to a Scream in your head, you can hear the influence.
Really?
There's another song that has like a Cure influence, and that was like Jim, if he'd hear something and take it in, he could turn it around into just like brilliance. Seriously. It's just witnessing that is like watching a miracle, really. I mean, it was just fascinating.
Well, that's kind of what my next question was going to be. So your home life, where now he is doing both bands full time. He obviously didn't have another job. He didn't have to have a job through this, right?
Well, actually, he did. His dad owned a carpet store, and Jim was one of his installers.
Really?
Well, not, I mean, between Pulley and Strung Out and the touring, but when he was home, he would help his dad out.
No kidding. So how big of a gap were there between tours where he would be like, okay, I've got like a month to just dick around. I don't want to stay idle, so I'll go work with my dad, or...
Well, and that depended because Jimmy, when he was writing an album, was completely different than Jim when he was just like chilling and home, but he was really close to his mom and dad. And if his dad needed him, he was there. And, he's a sweetheart. He put new carpet in my house. He put new carpet at my sister's house in Tennessee. I mean, he was just fucking awesome. Jim had a whole other side to him. He got on with my Southern family. Everyone in my family still adores him because he loved to fish. He loved to hike. He loved to, when we would go back to Tennessee, it was just like he was born there, if you can believe that. My one little brother went to the Strung Out Offspring show in Cleveland, Ohio, I think it was, somewhere in Ohio. So he saw that side of him. And then my youngest little brother went to a Pulley show, I think, in Colorado, in Denver, yeah. But the rest of my family, he was a musician, but they were like, it was a totally different Jim. And Jim, if you ask people, some people will say he's a fucking asshole, and other people will say he's great. I mean, he operated by mood. If he was in a shit mood, he was a shitty person. If he was in a good mood, he was a sweetheart. But he was, always, there was not much bullshit about him, if that makes sense.
I mean, it's kind of like the stories I've heard people being very afraid of Fletcher, just because he's not afraid like for their lives, but just this guy's a fucking partier on tour. And then I've heard like from Johanna and you that he's just like a total sweetheart. Like, I think there's different people who you're around in your mood where you can just be that way to that crowd.
Oh yeah, and and it, like I said, it depends. But I loved Fletcher from minute one. Fletcher was like a big teddy bear to me. I mean, I would just like hug me, And then other people are just like, "Oh God, Jesus Christ, Fletcher, he scares the shit out of me." I'm like, "Huh?"
Run for your life. He's drinking Jack Daniels.
Exactly, and I always was thoroughly entertained when Fletcher was fucked up. I was like, oh God, let me find a seat so I can sit down and watch this.
I feel like there's probably a certain crowd that he wouldn't fuck with, and you're like, or if he would, you'd be like, nah, back off. And you'd be like, all right.
Yeah, well, I would just, again, I tried to make sure that the boys didn't see me mad too much, because it was just so ugly. It was just so ugly. But I would always like stand up, threaten them like, I'll fuck you up. You know what I mean? So I got to tell you, being married to Jim, just like the home life, was amazing because we truly loved each other so much. I mean, we had a bit of a fight over Do you know about Ultimate Devotion?
No.
Oh, okay. Never mind.
Wait, why? What is it?
Well, it's a song on Twisted
Okay.
that Jimmy wrote.
Was that over a fight?
That was a fight because it's like the Jim Cherry idea of a love song, fucking kink anthem,
Okay.
basically.
Okay. I get where you're going here.
And he said, no, it's just going to go on the album and it's not going to be a fuss and people will just think that, it's like a cool song. Well, next thing you know, Fat Mike hears it, which I love Fat Mike and Aaron, loved Aaron. But Fat Mike's like, oh, this is the song, and puts it on the comp. And all this is done without like my knowledge until it's done. That pissed me off.
Why?
Because, Jimmy and I,
Because of the context? Actually, sorry, go on. I don't want to answer this for you.
no, Jimmy and I were like everyone in the scene basically knew we were just like way kinky.
Okay.
Jim's favorite thing to do, because Jim gave zero fucks, was get off stage and his shirt would be soaked and he'd take his shirt off to change and just be striped. And I mean striped his back, and gave two shits who saw it.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it always made me smile because I'm like, ooh, I did that. But yeah, so he writes Ultimate Devotion, which I got to tell you, the whole I walk through fire for you, I'll never love anyone else, the way that I love you. That I was just like, okay, that I love. But the rest of it, I was like, fucking Jimmy, seriously?
The latex rubber drives me insane part.
Yeah, I was like, seriously? And, so.
Were you just kind of upset because he was letting more people into what you guys were like, or?
And I've never been, obviously, I'm a licensed clinical psychologist that specializes in couples and sex therapy.
Yeah.
And I actually teach it at UCLA. There's no shame here. And there was no shame when you'd like take his shirt off. But, when you see hundreds of kids scream lyrics for years and years and years, the first thing that goes through your mind is like, wow, wonder how Jason Cruz is going to feel singing this one. Do you know what I mean?
Okay.
So there's that.
All right.
But that was a pretty serious fight because, which I figured out later what happened. So I threw a fit, lost my temper, put my foot down, and he was just like, oh shit, But Fat Mike also gives zero fucks.
Yeah, pretty much.
And he's like, I'm not scared of Wendy Cherry, so it's going on the comp. And so that's how that happened.
It kind of makes sense because I've read or listened to the book, the NOFX books that came out, because it goes very deep into Fat Mike's just own personal stuff. So I could see why that song would have stood out to him.
Oh yeah, Fat Mike's kinky. He's kinky as fuck, and he doesn't care. He gives zero fucks.
What were you doing at the time? Like, what was your profession?
When we met, I had an internet programming company, and then I was a consultant, internet consultant, computer consultant. Yeah. So I was like a nerd. And then I educated myself in music publishing and music publishing law. And I never did anything with that. I only did that for Jim. After he passed, I was like, okay, what do I want to do? And I was either going to go into law or psychology. And sorry about the noise in the background. That's my printer. I found my music catalog.
She's probably printing out the music catalog right now.
Yeah, give me a second. It's almost done. So I was either going to go into law or psychology. And I figured I wasn't a big enough asshole to go into law, so I went into psychology and went back to school after he passed. So that's what I'm doing now.
When you did the publishing for him and helped him get his publishing rights, did that cause a rift? Because I know he left the band in '99. Was that part of it?
I think so, because you know what? there was drama. And look, all the Strung Out guys came to Jim's memorial, his funeral. And I'm good with all of them. You know, I was pissed as hell and protective when they fired Jimmy. But at his memorial, we got right with each other. And like I said, I saw Rob just a few months ago, and that was lovely. And we're all good. But with drama, I mean, the guys in Strung Out had to make a choice. And, you know, I think Jordan was heavily involved in the management of the band. And with Jim pulling his publishing, there wasn't really an incentive to keep him. And I think they were just trying to minimize the drama, because there was a lot of drama. It wasn't too long after he pulled his publishing that he was out. And you know what? I don't know if you've heard Zero Down.
I haven't.
I love that record. It's amazing.
I'll have to check that out. Did he sing on it?
Yeah, Jim was the singer and the bass player.
I know he had started the band. I had just heard of Zero Down when I was doing some research for this interview.
Well, you know who you should interview is his guitar player, John McCree, because John McCree was in a band called War Called Peace and is also one of Fletcher's good friends. And John was in the scene from minute one, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm down for anyone who connects me to anybody to talk about the whole late 90s era. Totally down.
So just to finish up, if you're curious, so...
Yeah, because I know, because like typically when I'm talking to someone, the last two questions, like one I'll still ask, but usually I'll ask someone to plug something. But this is such an interesting conversation because it's like it's a very endearing story, and obviously I know that Jim had passed in 2002, I believe it was.
Yeah, it was July 7th, 2002. He actually would have been 48 this year.
You know, I want to just kind of like have you say what you want to say, because I mean, there's nothing to press, but I don't want to like bring that up a lot because I know it's probably, you know, a sensitive topic.
I think I'll have a hole in my heart until the day I die, because he was one of my great loves. And the fact of the matter is to set the record straight, on July 2nd, 2000, we were going to do a 4th of July celebration at his parents' house in Simi Valley, and he was going to a store to get some supplies for it, and he was rear-ended. He was making a right turn into the store parking lot, and some inebriated lady had her 14-year-old daughter driving and rear-ended 50 miles an hour. He was in his van, and it jacked him up. And instead of physical therapy and, addressing it, he was prescribed opioids. It got really bad. Fat Mike stepped in. I will always love Fat Mike for this, and helped get Jimmy in rehab. He was in rehab 90 days, got out, fell off the wagon again, went back, and I finally, because I had no idea until it was like way too late, because I had the mindset that he was my Jim, and Jim didn't even hardly drink alcohol or do anything when I met him. He didn't smoke pot. And so, I was the last to know just because I was naive. Well, I finally was at a loss. I mean, I kept finding pills, or he'd be fucked up, or he wouldn't come home. Anyway, I went to Al-Anon meetings, and they were like, the most loving thing you can do is throw him out. And it ripped my heart out. It ripped my heart out to throw him out. And I threw him out. He went to his parents, but God damn it, he got clean. He got clean because he wanted to come home. Unfortunately, when you go back and forth off opioids, they compromise your vascular system. So Jim passed away not from, everyone assumed it was from an opioid overdose. Jim passed away from cardiac arrhythmia, hypertensive heart disease, and coronary artery disease. So he was clean and had been clean for a few months when he died. The other thing that people don't know, which is absolutely heartbreaking, is that 30 days later, he was scheduled to come back home to me.
Oh, man.
So that is like the Shakespearean tragedy story of Jim and Wendy Cherry. Because, you know, one thing I don't regret is the last thing we said to each other. We had a thing. I'd say, I love you. And he'd say, bunches and bunches. And I'd say, you're the light of my life. And that's the last thing we said to each other.
God.
Right?
Oh, that's damn. That's brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, it was. It was brutal. But he gave me such a good I won't even go into everything inside me that he fixed and everything inside him that I fixed. But I look back on our time together as absolutely magical, not just between us, but everything that was going on. I listened to your podcast with Johanna and I was just like, yeah, exactly that. None of us had any fucking idea what we were doing. We were just taking it day by day, having fun and making music.
And that's the thing that just blows me away because when you talked about taking what I saw and times it by 5. I mean, I would probably times it by 10 or like 20. And
Well, but you know,
from my
I've got
perspective.
I've got a pretty high bar as far as partying, sweetheart. So.
Oh, I mean, partying, that's a whole different perspective. But like, I mean, just to parallel, I mean, I played in a band. Like in a band, it was you wrote songs, you played shows locally, you got in a shitty van or maybe a nice van, you went around the country. Hopefully, people showed up. You put out records and then rinse and repeat. And some bands got to do that and got labels, distro, people gave a shit, and other bands did it and no one gave a shit, or a small amount of people gave a shit, but we're all doing the same thing. And to look up at these guys, like I was in the band that we were like kind of getting a little distance, but it just wasn't really happening. We broke up. So seeing this, I was like, man, I'm so envious of that. And inside of that whole scene too, it's not perfect, but to see that you guys just treated it as just a lot of fucking fun, that's awesome. You were like, it was just a great fucking time. There was no, I mean, there was just times probably with some bullshit, but you were like, we just all had a fucking blast. And that's why I think it created that sound or that energy that people were super into.
Well, and as far as I'm concerned, looking back, I get it. I understand because these aren't a bunch of guys that are in a room with a formula or songwriting advisors tell them what a hook is and what a radio song is. These are the bunch of fucking guys in a room playing music that comes from their hearts and writing lyrics that come from their hearts without any other care than to create something that speaks to people, not for money, not for recognition, just to fucking punk rock. And so they didn't give two fucks while they were writing. So you know damn well they didn't give two fucks when they were touring or doing anything else. And that's what made it so amazing.
100%.
Yeah, no one, it was like alchemy. Every show was a different, crazy, creative, open experience. So the whole thing was magic. The whole thing.
I mean, that's what I've heard from anybody who's lived, they say they have a successful life. They're like, I just really was into doing this, and it just somehow happened that I made a living off of it. Instead of going, I really wrote these songs because I needed to get that hit single, and that just never came. Because you're like, well, you're going after the wrong reason.
Yeah, well, and that's philosophy, and that's music philosophy, and that the thing that defines punk rock, and it doesn't matter what genre, the thing that defines punk rock is to write and produce from your heart and from your being, not to make money. That's the antithesis of punk rock. But to see these guys live it. I mean, they live it. Fletcher, Jim, everyone in Pulley, everyone in Strung Out, they live it. It's like who they are. I mean, Jason's an accomplished artist, and it's so sweet. He just wrote a children's book. That's pretty awesome. And they live it. I mean, this is who they are. So it's about, I think, punk rock is about authenticity and craziness. And you mix those two together and it's magic.
Yeah. Oh, fuck yeah. I totally agree with that.
So I was lucky and blessed to be a part of that whole scene. I was just lucky just to witness.
So to wrap us up, so I always ask people to plug something. Is there anything that Jim has done that you're like, people should really go check this out or check this one song out or something? I don't know. I'm just trying to think like how that would mesh here.
You know what? To be honest with you, I'm glad you asked me that because I would urge anyone listening to this to listen to the Zero Down album with a lifetime to pay. And the reason is because that was a return to Jim's roots, and he didn't have confidence as a singer, and he auditioned. You should have seen the guys that showed up to sing for this band. I was just like, good God. Seriously, one guy showed up, he was the spitting image of young Axl Rose. I'm like, are you fucking kidding me? But he didn't have, and I told him, I said, you know what? You have a voice, and it's perfect for this. And so Jim sings and plays bass, which isn't easy.
No.
And Zero Down got a lot of critical acclaim as far as in the scene. So that was his last work. I think it was some of his best work. So anyone listening to this, I would urge you to check it out. And, you know, people still comment on my Facebook page, and I just want to tell everyone that it is so gratifying to me that he's not forgotten. Every time someone comments, not only on my page, but on like Pulley's, because I'm friends with all those guys, whenever I see someone comment on Jim, I know that he's not forgotten. And that means the world to me.
So I always ask, what scene ethics do you still hold on to this day? I don't know if it's possible to answer for Jim, if that seems like that makes sense.
It's so completely possible. It's so possible. What do I hang on to?
Yeah.
I hang even, you know, now that I'm like seriously adulting, even with my patients, with my students, with every single person in my life, I am authentic. I am 100% authentic. And that is what Jim left me with, because like him or hate him, he operated by his mood. He was always fucking authentic. And authenticity is what defines punk rock. It's what defined him. And, you know, it's what now defines me. Even as a professor, as a doctor, I am no airs, no bullshit, no trying to be cool. I'm 100% authentic. And that's what I'm grateful for.